All right, so we've gotten some pretty interesting stuff about Agile in the tech world,
Mm.
and it seems like Agile itself, the term, is kind of a
Hmm.
uh, it's almost like a trigger word for some people.
Yeah.
Some people swear by it, others just kind of roll their eyes.
Yeah.
Is it just another one of those empty buzzwords, you know, management fad, or is there something genuinely useful about this philosophy?
Mm.
I guess that's what we're going to try to unpack.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting to me is how the meaning of agile has really shifted over time.
Okay.
And so to understand what's going on today, I think we need to go back to the beginning.
Back to the beginning. Love it. So the source you sent over was a YouTube video by Thriving Technologist.
Okay.
And the title of the video is Agile Signaling is Gaslighting the Tech Industry.
Mm-hmm.
And it really goes into kind of the history of Agile and how it's been,
Yeah.
let's say, reinterpreted over the years.
Right.
But before we even get into the critique, can you give us kind of a quick refresher on what Agile was even supposed to be about in the first place?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
that was the big idea.
We're talking about, the late 90s,
Okay.
a time when technology was changing at an incredible pace.
Yeah.
This is the era of the dot-com boom, and so things are moving so fast, so unpredictably,
Right.
and traditional software development methods, which were often kind of rigid and waterfall-like, they were struggling to keep up.
Yeah, I imagine those old school methods are kind of like trying to steer a giant ship in a hurricane.
Yeah,
Not exactly known for their agility.
exactly. And so Agile emerges as this response to that need for adaptability and speed.
Okay.
And so at its core, Agile is really about embracing change,
Okay.
responding to feedback quickly,
Right.
and iterating constantly.
Okay.
And so think of it as a way to build software in small, manageable chunks
Okay.
and constantly checking in
Yeah.
to make sure that you're on the right track.
Okay. So more flexible, kind
Yeah.
of a more responsive approach to software development.
Exactly.
Makes sense. But the video argues that somewhere along the way, Agile got
Yeah.
like twisted.
That's right. Yeah.
How did that happen?
The video really argues that there's a series of events.
Okay.
They call it the 4 horsemen of Agile distortion that have fundamentally changed how Agile is perceived and practiced
Okay.
to the point where it's actually almost gaslighting developers.
Hold on. Gaslighting.
Yeah.
That's a pretty loaded term.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure.
What does that even mean in this context?
So gaslighting is really a form of manipulation that makes someone question their own sanity or their own perceptions.
Okay.
Right? And so in this case, the video argues that by twisting Agile's original meaning and intent, companies might be creating a situation where developers feel pressured to conform to this kind of distorted version of Agile, even if it contradicts their own experience and understanding of good software development practices.
So if you're feeling stressed out, burnt out, like you're constantly fighting against the system, but you're being told it's all in the name of Agile.
Exactly.
You're not imagining things.
Exactly.
There might be something deeper going on.
Yeah, I think that the video claims that this feeling of disconnect, of being told that you're doing Agile when it doesn't feel Agile at all,
Right.
is a direct result of how the concept has been distorted over time.
Okay, so now I'm really curious about these so-called 4 horsemen
Yeah.
that supposedly led to this Agile distortion.
Yeah.
What's the first one?
The first horseman is the introduction of burn-down charts and velocity tracking
Okay.
as core metrics of Agile success.
Wait, those weren't part of the original Agile philosophy.
Yeah,
I always thought those were like essential tools. I mean,
Right.
How else do you measure progress?
Yeah.
How else do you keep teams on track?
It's a common misconception,
Okay.
burn-down charts, which visually track the amount of work remaining over time, and velocity tracking, which measures a team's rate of work completion.
Right.
These were not part of the original Agile manifesto or the Scrum framework.
Really?
Yeah.
So where did they come from?
They were added later,
Okay.
likely as a way to give management a sense of predictability and control over software development, which ironically goes against the very spirit of Agile.
So instead of embracing the uncertainty and the adaptability that Agile is supposed to be all about,
Right.
these metrics might actually be encouraging a more rigid and inflexible approach
Exactly.
to software development.
And that can create a real problem.
Okay.
Because if the goal is to ship software quickly, without regard for quality or sustainability,
Right.
these metrics can actually incentivize teams to cut corners.
Yeah.
just to hit these arbitrary targets.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see how focusing solely on speed could really backfire.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever used these metrics to like push you to work faster, even if it meant sacrificing quality or learning?
Yeah. Happens more often than you think.
Yeah.
And this leads us to the second horseman of Agile distortion. The title of Jeff Sutherland's book,
Okay.
The Art of Scrum, Getting Twice the Work Done in Half the Time.
Oh, yeah, Jeff Sutherland, one of
Yeah.
the founders of Scrum.
Jeff Sutherland, one of the founders of Scrum.
Yeah, so this book was like hugely influential in shaping how people understood Agile.
Right. And so
But yeah, that title definitely seems to put the emphasis on speed and efficiency above all else.
yeah,
It's almost like it's promising some magical productivity hack.
exactly.
Like you could just,
Right.
wave a wand and suddenly you're
Yeah.
twice as productive.
Exactly. And while the book itself,
Yeah.
might
Very
have
valuable insight.
might have some valuable insights, I think that title sends a potentially misleading message
Okay.
because it implies that Agile is all about squeezing more work out of developers in less time.
Which, as we've discussed, isn't really the point.
Right. It's not about working faster. It's about working smarter.
Exactly.
It's about being more adaptable, responsive to change, and ultimately delivering a better product.
Right.
But, isn't there a risk that this focus on speed could lead to burning it and compromise quality?
Yeah.
How do you see that playing out in real-world teams?
That's a great question. And it's a real concern,
Yeah.
When teams are constantly pressured to deliver more faster,
Right.
it creates this culture of fear and anxiety.
Right.
And so people start cutting corners, neglecting important aspects like testing and documentation
Yeah.
just to meet deadlines.
Right.
And in the long run, that can lead to, technical debt,
Yeah.
buggy software, ultimately unhappy customers.
So it's kind of a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
The pressure to deliver quickly leads to shortcuts,
Right.
which then creates more problems down the line, leading to even more pressure.
Exactly. And this brings us to the third horseman.
The rise of Agile certifications.
Oh, yeah, this is the certifications.
Everyone in tech these days is a certified Scrum Master or a product owner or some version of that.
Right. It seems like everyone's got a certification.
Right.
But the video makes this really interesting point.
Yeah.
Have these certifications become more about selling certificates than actually promoting a deep understanding of Agile principles?
Yeah. It's definitely something to consider.
Yeah.
As the demand for Agile practitioners grew,
Right.
the market for Agile training and certifications also grew.
Right.
And as with any industry, there's a risk that the focus can shift from providing genuine value to simply generating revenue.
So you might end up with a situation where people are getting certified without really grasping the underlying principles
Right.
or how to apply them electively.
That's right.
It's like they know the jargon, they can talk the talk,
Right.
but they might not actually be able to walk the walk.
Yeah, exactly. And this ties back to the idea of gaslighting, because if you're working with someone who claims to be an Agile expert,
Right.
but is actually just following this rigid set of rules without understanding the context or the why behind them,
Right.
it can be incredibly frustrating and demoralizing.
It's like they're speaking a different language even though they're using the same words.
Exactly.
That must create a lot of confusion and tension within teams.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the fourth
Okay.
and perhaps most controversial horseman, the introduction of SAFE,
Okay.
the Scaled Agile Framework.
SAFE. It seems like every large organization is trying to implement SAFE these days.
Yeah.
But
It's everywhere.
I've always been a little bit skeptical.
Yeah.
It seems like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
Can you really scale something that's supposed to be about flexibility and adaptability?
It's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
SAFE was designed to address the challenges of implementing Agile in large organizations
Right.
with multiple teams, complex dependencies.
Right.
But the video argues that in trying to scale Agile, SAFE might actually be making things less agile.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, think about it. As organizations grow,
okay.
they tend to become more hierarchical, more bureaucratic,
Right.
more layers of management, more processes,
Yeah.
more approvals required to get anything done.
Right.
And that can stifle innovation and make it much harder to adapt to change quickly.
So you're saying that SAFE, instead of breaking down those barriers and promoting agility, might actually be reinforcing them?
That's the argument.
Wow.
Yeah, by introducing even more processes and structures,
Yeah.
SAFe might actually be creating more complexity and rigidity,
Yeah.
which is the opposite of what Agile is supposed to be about.
So it's like they took this beautiful, lightweight framework
Right,
and turned it into this giant lumbering machine.
right.
It seems like a classic example of how good intentions can go astray when you try to scale things beyond a certain point.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that SAFe is just one framework.
Okay.
It's just one approach to scaling Agile. There are others out there.
Right.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
So if you're working in a large organization that's adopted SAFe,
yeah.
and you're feeling stifled by the bureaucracy and the lack of agility,
Yeah.
what can you do?
Well, the first step is to recognize that you're not alone.
Okay.
A lot of people feel this way.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that SAFe, like any framework, is just a tool.
Oh.
It can be used effectively or it can be misused.
So it's not necessarily about throwing SAFe at the window.
Right.
It's about using it thoughtfully
Exactly.
and adapting it to your specific needs and context.
Exactly.
So how does this all tie back to the idea of agile gaslighting
Yeah.
that we talked about earlier?
Well, if you're working in an environment where SAFe has been implemented in a way that feels rigid, bureaucratic, and disempowering,
Right.
and you're being told that this is true Agile, then it's easy to start questioning your own judgment. You know? You might start thinking, maybe I'm just not getting it.
Right.
Maybe I'm the problem. And that's exactly what gaslighting is all about,
Right.
making you doubt your own perceptions and experiences.
That's a really powerful insight. It's like you're being told that you're living in a different reality than everyone else.
Exactly.
And it can be incredibly difficult to push back against that, especially if you're dealing with people in positions of authority.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to raise awareness about these potential distortions,
Right.
and to empower people to speak up and challenge the status quo.
So what's the antidote to this agile gaslighting? How do we reclaim that original spirit of agile and create a more authentic, more humane way of working?
Yeah, it feels like we've really been exploring some of the darker sides of Agile, but you know, where do we go from here?
Right.
How do we get back to that original vision?
You know, those empowered teams, continuous learning, and actually delivering value.
I think a big part of it is really just raising awareness.
Okay.
You know, the more people that understand how these distortions have kind of crept in, the more they can start to recognize them in their own workplaces,
Right.
and start to push back against them.
So knowledge is power. The more we understand the problem, the better equipped we are to kind of fight back against it.
Exactly. And it's not just about
Right.
recognizing bad Agile. It's also about remembering what good Agile looks and feels like.
Okay, so remind us, what are those like core principles that seem to have gotten lost along the way?
Well, I think at its heart, Agile is about empowering teams to make decisions
Okay.
and solve problems collaboratively.
Okay.
It's about trusting people to do their best work.
Yeah.
Giving them the autonomy to experiment. Creating a safe space to learn from mistakes.
It's interesting because you're really highlighting the human element of Agile.
Yeah.
It's not just about the processes and tools.
Right.
It's about creating a culture where people feel valued and
Yeah.
respected and empowered.
Absolutely. And that's something that I think can get lost when we focus too much on metrics and certifications and frameworks.
Like we become so obsessed with like measuring and controlling everything that we've kind of forgotten about the people who are actually doing the work.
Yeah. And ironically, I think that can actually lead to a decrease in productivity and innovation.
Okay.
You know, when people feel micromanaged and disempowered,
Right.
they're less likely to take risks to experiment, to come up with new ideas.
So what's the solution? How do we create a more humane and authentically agile work environment?
Well, I think it starts with leadership.
Okay.
You know, leaders need to set the tone by embracing Agile principles, not just in word, but in deed.
Right.
They need to trust their teams,
Okay.
delegate authority, create a culture of transparency and continuous improvement.
So it's about leading by example.
Yeah.
If leaders are truly committed to agile,
Right.
it will show in their actions and their decisions.
Exactly. But I don't think it's just about leadership. I think it's also about individuals taking ownership and speaking up.
Okay.
You know, if you see something that's not working,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to challenge it.
Okay.
Ask questions, offer suggestions, advocate for a better way of doing things.
So it's about creating a culture of feedback and continuous improvement where everyone feels comfortable speaking up and sharing their ideas.
Precisely. Agile is a journey, not a destination. It's about constantly experimenting, learning, and adapting.
Right.
And the more we can foster that culture of openness and collaboration, the more successful we'll be.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive.
Good.
I feel like I have a much clearer understanding of, what Agile was supposed to be about, how it's been distorted, and what we can do to kind of reclaim that true spirit of Agile.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And remember, the power to change things really lies within each of us. And so if you're passionate about Agile, don't be afraid to speak up and make a difference.
Awesome. So for you listening, what really resonated with you today? Have you experienced any of these Agile distortions in your own work? What's one small step you can take to bring more authenticity to your team or organization?
Yeah.
We'd love to hear your thoughts, show your stories, your insights, your ideas.
Yeah, let's keep this conversation going.
Thanks for diving deep with us. And until next time, stay curious and keep challenging the status quo.